Dr. Elijah Carter was not just any doctor, he was a name people remembered. Born and raised in a small town where opportunities were scarce, Elijah had fought hard to get where he was today. His journey was filled with challenges, financial struggles, long hours of study under dim lights, and countless sacrifices, but through sheer determination, he became one of the most respected surgeons in the city. At St. Mary's Hospital, everyone knew him as the miracle worker, a man whose steady hands could save lives when all hope seemed lost. Elijah stood out not only because of his skills but also because of who he was, a black man excelling in a profession still dominated by others. He often faced subtle biases, from being questioned more than his colleagues to having his abilities doubted by some patients. Yet, he never let these moments define him. Instead, he worked harder, proving himself time and again. Over the years, he'd earned the trust of those around him. Patients would request him specifically for surgeries, knowing they were in safe hands. Colleagues admired his calm demeanor under pressure and his ability to make even the toughest cases seem manageable. On this particular morning, Dr. Carter arrived at the hospital early, as usual. The air buzzed with activity, nurses rushing down hallways, doctors discussing cases, and machines beeping softly in patient rooms. Today was going to be a big day. A young child named Mia, barely 6 years old, needed emergency surgery. She had been diagnosed with a rare condition that required immediate intervention. Without the procedure, her chances of survival were slim. The responsibility weighed heavily on Elijah's shoulders, but he didn't show it. To those around him, he appeared focused and composed, ready to tackle whatever came his way. The operating room was prepared meticulously. Everything had to be perfect, the instruments sterilized, the equipment checked, the team briefed. As the head surgeon, Dr. Carter led the preparations. He spoke calmly to his team, outlining each step of the complex operation. His confidence reassured everyone present. Nurses double-checked IV lines, while the anesthesiologist monitored Mia's vitals closely. For a moment, the tension in the room eased, replaced by a sense of purpose. This was what they trained for, to give people like Mia a second chance at life. Before stepping into the OR, Elijah took a deep breath. He thought about Mia's parents waiting anxiously outside, praying for their daughter's recovery. He reminded himself why he chose this path, to help people, to make a difference. With renewed resolve, he entered the operating room, pulling on his gloves and adjusting his mask. The bright lights illuminated every corner of the space, casting sharp shadows on the walls. The hum of machinery filled the silence as the team waited for the signal to begin. What no one expected, however, was that this routine surgery would soon turn into something far more dramatic. Little did Dr. Carter know that within hours, his life and career would take a shocking turn. For now, though, all eyes were on him as he picked up the scalpel, ready to perform yet another miracle. The operating room was a place of precision and focus, a sanctuary where distractions were not allowed. Dr. Elijah Carter had just begun the delicate procedure on little Mia when an unusual sound broke the sterile calm. Footsteps. Heavy, hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway outside the OR. At first, no one paid much attention. Hospitals were busy places after all, and sounds like these were common. But then, the door swung open without warning. Two police officers stepped inside, their uniforms stark against the white walls of the operating room. Their presence immediately disrupted the carefully orchestrated rhythm of the surgery. Nurses froze mid-task, and the anesthesiologist glanced up from his monitors, confusion etched on his face. Even Dr. Carter paused, his hands hovering over the patient as he turned to look at the intruders. "What's going on?" one of the nurses asked nervously, breaking the stunned silence. "We're here for Dr. Elijah Carter," one of the officers announced firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. His tone left no room for argument, but it also raised more questions than answers. Dr. Carter furrowed his brow, his mind racing. "Excuse me," he said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the rising unease in his chest. "I'm in the middle of a life-saving surgery. Whatever this is about, can it wait?" The second officer shook his head. "We've been ordered to bring you in immediately. There's been a serious accusation made against you." The words hit the room like a bombshell. Gasps rippled through the medical team. Accusation? Against Dr. Carter? It sounded absurd. Everyone knew him. He was a pillar of professionalism, someone who dedicated his life to helping others. What could possibly justify interrupting such a critical operation? Sir, please, another nurse interjected, stepping forward cautiously. This is a child's life we're talking about. Can't this wait until after the surgery? But the officers didn't budge. They exchanged glances before the first officer spoke again. We understand the situation, but our orders are clear. We cannot delay this arrest. Arrest. The word hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Dr. Carter felt his heart pounding in his chest. This had to be some kind of mistake. He hadn't done anything wrong. Yet, as the officers approached him, their intentions became painfully clear. I need to finish this surgery, Dr. Carter insisted, his voice firmer now. You don't understand. The patient will die if I leave. We're sorry, doctor, the second officer replied, though his expression showed little sympathy. But we have protocols to follow. Before anyone could react further, the officers moved closer. One of them produced a pair of handcuffs, the metallic clink sending a chill through the room. Dr. Carter hesitated, torn between resisting and complying. In the end, knowing that fighting back would only make things worse, he reluctantly held out his wrists. The cold metal snapped shut around them, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the latex gloves he still wore. The sight was surreal. Dr. Carter, a man known for saving lives, standing in handcuffs while a child lay unconscious on the operating table. Nurses whispered urgently among themselves, debating whether they should intervene or call hospital administration. Some looked on the verge of tears, unable to comprehend how this could happen. How could anyone accuse such a respected surgeon of wrongdoing? And why now, during something so crucial? As the officers led Dr. Carter away, his bloodied scrubs trailing behind him, the entire team was left in shock. The room felt colder somehow, emptier, as though the very soul of the operation had been ripped away. For a moment, no one moved. Then reality set in. Someone had to take charge. Someone had to save Mia. But even as the remaining staff scrambled to stabilize the situation, one question lingered in everyone's minds. What exactly was happening to Dr. Carter? The operating room, once a place of order and precision, descended into chaos the moment Dr. Elijah Carter was led away in handcuffs. Nurses exchanged panicked glances, unsure of what to do next. The anesthesiologist quickly stepped forward, taking charge as best he could, but his voice trembled as he tried to reassure the team. We need to focus, he said urgently, though his own hands betrayed his nerves. Mia's life depends on us. We can't let this situation distract us. But it was easier said than done. The sudden removal of their lead surgeon had thrown everything off balance. Dr. Carter wasn't just any doctor, he was the backbone of the operation. Without him, the team felt directionless, like sailors caught in a storm without a captain. Every second counted, and hesitation was not an option. One of the senior nurses, Sarah, took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. She knew they couldn't afford to fall apart. Okay, everyone, she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. We've trained for emergencies like this. Let's regroup and follow the protocol. Someone call Dr. Patel. He's on standby today. He'll have to take over. Dr. Patel, another skilled surgeon at St. Mary's Hospital, arrived within minutes. Though experienced, he hadn't been briefed on Mia's case beforehand. As he donned his scrubs and gloves, the team frantically updated him on the details of the surgery. Time was slipping away, and every delay increased the risk to the young patient. Meanwhile, outside the OR, whispers spread like wildfire among the hospital staff. Word of Dr. Carter's arrest traveled quickly, leaving everyone stunned. How could this happen? Why would the police barge into an operating room during such a critical procedure? Some doctors demanded answers from the administration, while others gathered near the OR doors, hoping for updates on Mia's condition. Inside, the pressure mounted. Dr. Patel worked tirelessly, trying to pick up where Dr. Carter had left off. But surgeries were intricate processes, and switching surgeons mid-operation was far from ideal. The new doctors struggled to adapt to the specific techniques Dr. Carter had been using. Instruments clinked nervously as assistants handed them over, their movements less confident than before. Mia's vitals began to fluctuate, causing alarm bells to ring softly in the background. The anesthesiologist adjusted the settings on his machines, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought to keep her stable. Her heart rate is dropping. He called out, his voice rising with urgency. We need to act fast. Sarah sprang into action, assisting Dr. Patel with whatever he needed. Her mind raced as she tried to anticipate each step of the procedure. They had no choice but to push forward, even if the odds seemed stacked against them. For Mia's sake, failure was not an option. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere grew heavier. No one spoke of Dr. Carter directly, but his absence loomed large over the room. His calm presence, his steady hands, his reassuring words, all of it was missing now. The team missed him more than they cared to admit, especially in a moment like this when they needed him most. Finally, after what felt like hours, the surgery reached its final stages. Dr. Patel managed to complete the procedure, though it had been far more difficult than anyone anticipated. Exhausted, the team removed their masks and gloves, their faces pale with relief and exhaustion. Mia had survived, for now, but her condition remained critical, and only time would tell if she would fully recover. Outside, the hospital buzzed with activity. News of the arrest continued to ripple through the corridors, sparking outrage and disbelief. People couldn't stop talking about it. How could law enforcement treat a respected surgeon this way, and why had they chosen the worst possible moment to intervene? For the medical team, however, there was little time to dwell on these questions. Their focus remained on Mia, lying fragile and vulnerable in the ICU. But even as they monitored her closely, one thought lingered in everyone's minds. What had really happened to Dr. Carter? And would justice be served for the man who had devoted his life to saving others? Asterisk. By the time Dr. Elijah Carter was taken out of St. Mary's Hospital, news of his arrest had already begun to spread like wildfire. Someone in the hospital, whether a staff member or a visitor, had captured footage of the shocking scene on their phone. The video showed two police officers leading Dr. Carter away in handcuffs, his scrubs still stained with blood from the operating room. Within hours, the clip went viral, sparking outrage across social media platforms. People watched in disbelief as they saw the respected surgeon being treated like a criminal. Comments flooded in from all corners of the country. How could this happen? One user wrote, "This man was saving a child's life." Others expressed anger at the apparent disregard for hospital protocol and questioned why law enforcement would interrupt such a critical procedure. Hashtags like #JusticeForDrCarter and #RespectOurHeroes began trending nationwide, drawing attention to what many viewed as an egregious misuse of authority. The story quickly made its way to major news outlets. Reporters scrambled to gather information, interviewing hospital staff, patients, and even Dr. Carter's family. His wife, Lisa Carter, appeared on national television, her voice trembling with emotion as she spoke about her husband. "Elijah is a good man," she said, fighting back tears. "He has dedicated his entire life to helping others. I can't understand why anyone would accuse him of something so terrible." Lisa's words resonated deeply with viewers. Footage of her speaking alongside their two young children, a boy and a girl, only added to the public's sympathy for the family. Social media users shared photos of Dr. Carter at charity events, community health drives, and award ceremonies, painting a picture of a man who had spent years giving back to society. The contrast between these images and the video of his arrest was jarring, fueling calls for accountability. Protests erupted outside the hospital and police station within days. Hundreds of people gathered, holding signs that read, "Hands off our doctors," and "End racial profiling now." Many protesters believed that race played a role in the incident, pointing out how unlikely it seemed for a white doctor to face similar treatment under the same circumstances. Civil rights activists joined the demonstrations, using the case to highlight broader issues of systemic bias in law enforcement. Meanwhile, the hospital administration found itself under intense scrutiny. Critics accused St. Mary's of failing to protect Dr. Carter and allowing the police to disrupt a life-saving operation without proper justification. In response, the hospital released a carefully worded statement defending its actions. "We cooperated fully with law enforcement officials due to the seriousness of the allegations," the statement read. However, it stopped short of explaining why the arrest couldn't wait until after the surgery. As public pressure mounted, local authorities were forced to address the growing controversy. The police department issued its own statement, claiming that the arrest was based on credible evidence and insisting that officers followed standard procedures. but vague phrases like credible evidence did little to satisfy the public's demand for answers. Skeptics pointed out that no details about the alleged crime had been disclosed, leaving room for speculation and doubt. Amid the chaos, the condition of Mia, the child whose surgery had been interrupted, remained a topic of concern. While she had survived the procedure, doctors warned that complications could arise due to the disruption caused by the arrest. This revelation added another layer of tragedy to the unfolding drama. Protesters argued that the consequences of the arrest extended beyond Dr. Carter. They endangered an innocent child's life as well. For Dr. Carter himself, locked in a holding cell, the weight of the situation must have felt unbearable. Surrounded by uncertainty and cut off from his loved ones, he could only imagine the storm raging outside. Yet, despite the injustice he faced, he remained calm and composed during brief interactions with his lawyer. Those who knew him weren't surprised. He had always been a man of resilience and dignity. As the nation continued to watch and wait, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about Dr. Carter anymore. It was about fairness, trust, and the need for change in institutions that wielded immense power over people's lives. And though the road ahead promised to be long and difficult, the overwhelming support for Dr. Carter suggested that the fight for justice was far from over. As the days passed, the pressure on law enforcement to explain Dr. Elijah Carter's arrest grew unbearable. Protesters filled the streets, demanding answers, while news outlets relentlessly pursued leads to uncover what had really happened. The police department, now under intense scrutiny, finally began releasing fragments of information about the case. What they revealed shocked everyone, but not in the way anyone expected. It turned out that the warrant for Dr. Carter's arrest was based on an accusation so flimsy it bordered on absurd. Someone had reported him as a key figure in a cybercrime ring suspected of hacking into government databases and stealing classified information. According to investigators, the tip came from an anonymous source who claimed to have evidence linking Dr. Carter to the crimes. However, upon closer inspection, the evidence was nothing more than a series of fraudulent emails sent using his stolen identity. Dr. Carter's lawyer, Ms. Angela Hayes, wasted no time in pointing out the glaring flaws in the case. "My client has been a victim of identity theft," she declared during a press conference outside the courthouse. The real question here is why law enforcement acted so recklessly without verifying their facts. Arresting a respected surgeon in the middle of surgery? That's negligence at best and malicious intent at worst. Angela presented documents proving that Dr. Carter's personal information, his social security number, bank account details, and even his hospital credentials, had been compromised months earlier. He had reported the theft to the authorities but received little help at the time. Now, it seemed clear that whoever stole his identity had used it to frame him for these crimes. Friends, family, and colleagues rallied around Dr. Carter, providing alibis and testimonies to prove his innocence. Fellow doctors attested to his whereabouts during the times the alleged crimes took place. Hospital records showed he was performing surgeries or attending meetings when the supposed illegal activities occurred. Even patients came forward, sharing stories of how Dr. Carter had saved their lives, emphasizing that he simply didn't have the time, or the motive, to engage in criminal behavior. But perhaps the most damning revelation came when investigators traced the fraudulent emails back to their origin. It turned out that the person behind them was part of a larger scheme targeting high-profile individuals. This individual, whose name was kept confidential until charges were filed, specialized in exploiting stolen identities to divert attention away from their own illegal operations. Once caught, they admitted to framing Dr. Carter because of his prominence and assumed wealth, thinking it would take longer for someone like him to clear his name. Public outrage reached new heights as these details emerged. People couldn't believe that such a grave mistake could happen in the first place, and that it had cost Dr. Carter so dearly. The fact that his arrest had jeopardized a child's life made the situation even more infuriating. Protesters demanded accountability, calling for disciplinary action against the officers involved and reforms in how warrants were issued and executed. For Dr. Carter, the truth brought some relief but also deep frustration. Sitting in his home after being released on bail, he reflected on everything he had endured. His reputation, though intact among those who knew him personally, had been dragged through the mud. The stress of the ordeal weighed heavily on him, and he struggled to sleep at night, haunted by thoughts of Mia and whether she would fully recover. Despite the injustice, Dr. Carter refused to let bitterness consume him. Instead, he channeled his energy into planning for the future. With the support of civil rights organizations, he decided to use his experience to advocate for change. If his story could prevent something like this from happening to someone else, he believed it would be worth it. As the nation continued to follow the unfolding events, one thing became undeniable. Dr. Elijah Carter was not just a victim of circumstance, he was a symbol of resilience. And while the scars of this incident would remain, they would not define him. While Dr. Elijah Carter fought to clear his name, the fate of Mia, the young girl whose surgery had been interrupted, remained uncertain. Her condition was critical, and though she had survived the initial operation, complications soon arose that tested the limits of modern medicine. The disruption caused by Dr. Carter's sudden arrest had left a lasting impact, not just on her recovery, but also on the morale of the medical team who continued to care for her. In the days following the surgery, Mia developed a fever, a sign of possible infection. Her body struggled to heal, and her vitals fluctuated dangerously. Nurses monitored her around the clock, adjusting medications and equipment as needed. Doctors held urgent meetings to discuss next steps, each session filled with tension and whispered concerns. Every decision felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong move could cost the child her life. Dr. Patel, the surgeon who had stepped in after Dr. Carter's arrest, visited Mia's bedside daily. Though he tried to remain optimistic, the guilt of not being able to save her weighed heavily on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that if Dr. Carter had been allowed to finish the procedure, things might have turned out differently. "I did my best," he told himself repeatedly, yet doubt lingered in his mind. Mia's parents, Sarah and Michael, spent every moment they could at their daughter's side. They sat by her bed, holding her tiny hand and praying silently. Their faces were pale with exhaustion, dark circles under their eyes telling the story of sleepless nights spent worrying about their little girl. When reporters approached them for interviews, they declined, saying they didn't want to draw attention away from Mia's fight for survival. But privately, they couldn't help but feel anger toward the system that had failed both their daughter and Dr. Carter. For Dr. Carter, updates on Mia's condition were painful to hear. Though he wasn't allowed back in the hospital during the investigation, friends and colleagues kept him informed. Each report broke his heart a little more. He knew he should have been there, finishing the surgery, guiding the team, ensuring the best possible outcome. Instead, he was stuck at home, powerless to help. "I feel responsible," he confessed to his wife, Lisa, during one particularly difficult evening. "If I hadn't been taken away, maybe none of this would have happened." Lisa placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You can't blame yourself," she said firmly. "This isn't your fault. The people who did this, they're the ones who need to answer for what's happening to Mia." The public shared Lisa's sentiment. As news of Mia's declining health spread, outrage intensified. Protesters outside the hospital began carrying signs that read "Justice for Mia," alongside those supporting Dr. Carter. Social media posts highlighted the tragedy, pointing out how an innocent child had become collateral damage in a botched arrest. Even local politicians weighed in, calling for investigations into the handling of the case and urging reforms to prevent similar incidents in the future. Finally, after weeks of uncertainty, there was a glimmer of hope. Mia's fever began to subside, and her vitals stabilized. It was a small victory, but it gave everyone involved a renewed sense of optimism. Doctors cautiously expressed relief, while Mia's parents finally allowed themselves to smile, however briefly. The road to full recovery would still be long, but the worst seemed to be over. For Dr. Carter, hearing the good news brought tears to his eyes. He prayed silently, thanking God for sparing Mia's life. Yet, the experience left an indelible mark on him. He realized that his work was about more than just saving lives. It was about fighting for justice, fairness, and humanity within the systems that govern society. And as he looked ahead, he vowed to use his voice to ensure no other family or doctor would ever have to endure what he and Mia's family had gone through. The tide finally began to turn in Dr. Elijah Carter's favor as the investigation into his arrest reached its climax. Public pressure, combined with mounting evidence of his innocence, forced authorities to take decisive action. The police department launched an internal review of the incident, and it didn't take long for cracks to appear in their initial defense of the arrest. Officers involved admitted they hadn't thoroughly verified the warrant before storming into the operating room. They claimed they were following orders but couldn't explain why such urgency was deemed necessary when the alleged crime had no immediate threat to public safety. The revelation that Dr. Carter's identity had been stolen and used maliciously by a cybercriminal was undeniable proof of his innocence. The real culprit behind the fraudulent emails confessed during questioning, providing investigators with detailed accounts of how he targeted high-profile individuals like Dr. Carter. This confession shattered any remaining doubts about Dr. Carter's involvement in the crimes. Within weeks, all charges against him were officially dropped. But dropping the charges wasn't enough for the public or Dr. Carter himself. People demanded accountability from those who had wrongfully accused and arrested him. Protesters outside the police station chanted slogans calling for justice, holding signs that read, "Apologize to Dr. Carter," and "Hold police accountable." Civil rights organizations joined the outcry, filing formal complaints against the officers involved and demanding systemic reforms to prevent similar incidents in the future. In response, the police chief held a press conference, flanked by city officials. His tone was somber as he addressed the nation. "We deeply regret the harm caused to Dr. Elijah Carter and his family," he said, reading from a prepared statement. "This case highlights serious flaws in our procedures, and we are committed to making changes to ensure this never happens again." 2 officers directly involved in the arrests were suspended pending further disciplinary action. While some viewed this as a step toward justice, others felt it wasn't enough. Dr. Carter's lawyer, Ms. Angela Hayes, vowed to pursue legal action against the department for damages caused by the wrongful arrest. Dr. Carter's reputation has been tarnished, his career disrupted, and his mental health affected, she stated emphatically. He deserves compensation, not just financially, but through meaningful reforms. For Dr. Carter, the apology and suspension of the officers brought a sense of closure, though it couldn't erase the pain he had endured. Standing alongside his wife Lisa at a press conference, he spoke calmly yet firmly. "I am grateful to be free and cleared of these false accusations," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of emotion behind his words. "But I cannot forget the impact this ordeal had on my life, and on Mia's life. No one should ever have to go through what we did." His remarks resonated deeply with the public. People admired his grace under pressure and his determination to use his experience for good. Instead of retreating into bitterness, Dr. Carter partnered with advocacy groups to push for policy changes. He called for stricter guidelines on issuing arrest warrants, especially in cases involving professionals like doctors, teachers, or emergency responders whose work directly impacted lives. He also urged lawmakers to address systemic biases that disproportionately affected minorities. As news outlets covered his efforts, support poured in from across the country. Donations flooded into organizations fighting racial profiling and injustice, many earmarked specifically for campaigns inspired by Dr. Carter's story. Schools invited him to speak about resilience and perseverance, while medical conferences honored him as a symbol of integrity and dedication. Meanwhile, Mia continued her slow but steady recovery. Her parents expressed gratitude to Dr. Carter and the entire medical team, acknowledging the role everyone played in saving her life. Though complications from the surgery left her with lasting challenges, Mia's spirit remained unbroken. She became a beacon of hope for Dr. Carter, reminding him why he had chosen this path in the first place. With justice served and reforms underway, Dr. Carter returned to St. Mary's Hospital, greeted by thunderous applause from staff and patients alike. For him, this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. Armed with renewed purpose, he stepped back into the operating room, ready to heal not only bodies but also a broken system. Dr. Elijah Carter's return to St. Mary's Hospital marked more than just the comeback of a skilled surgeon. It symbolized resilience, hope, and the power of standing up against injustice. The moment he walked through the hospital doors, wearing his familiar white coat, the staff erupted into applause. Nurses hugged him, colleagues patted him on the back, and even patients who recognized him from news coverage smiled warmly. It was as though the entire building breathed a sigh of relief. Dr. Carter was home where he belonged. But Dr. Carter knew this wasn't the end of his journey. While he was grateful to be back doing what he loved, he couldn't ignore the scars left by the ordeal. He had seen firsthand how systemic flaws could devastate lives, not only his own but also Mia's and her family's. Determined to make a difference, he decided to channel his experience into advocacy work. He partnered with civil rights organizations, speaking at rallies, conferences, and community events about the need for reform in law enforcement and healthcare systems. His speeches resonated deeply with audiences. "What happened to me wasn't just an isolated incident," he often said. "It was a reflection of larger problems that affect countless people every day. We must demand better, not just for ourselves but for future generations." His words inspired many, particularly young Black professionals who saw him as a role model. They reached out to him, sharing their own struggles with bias and discrimination, and he listened intently, offering advice and encouragement whenever he could. One of Dr. Carter's most significant contributions came when he co-founded an initiative called Healing Beyond Borders. The program aimed to address racial disparities in healthcare while promoting accountability in institutions like law enforcement. Through workshops, mentorship programs, and policy recommendations, Healing Beyond Borders sought to create safer spaces for marginalized communities. It quickly gained traction, attracting support from doctors, lawyers, activists, and everyday citizens eager to drive change. The story of Mia became central to Dr. Carter's advocacy efforts. Though she still faced challenges due to complications from her surgery, her progress served as a testament to the importance of trust, teamwork, and perseverance. Dr. Carter visited her regularly during her recovery, bringing small gifts and checking on her condition. Their bond grew stronger with each visit, and Mia began referring to him as the doctor who never gave up. Her parents thanked him endlessly, not just for saving her life but also for using their painful experience to help others. As months turned into years, Dr. Carter's legacy continued to grow. Schools named scholarships after him, honoring students committed to social justice and medicine. Hospitals implemented new protocols to prevent similar disruptions during critical procedures. Lawmakers introduced bills inspired by his case, aiming to ensure proper verification before executing arrest warrants. These changes didn't happen overnight, but they were proof that one person's courage could spark meaningful transformation. Despite all the recognition, Dr. Carter remained humble. He never sought fame or glory. His focus was always on helping others. Whether performing surgeries, mentoring young doctors, or speaking at rallies, he approached everything with the same quiet determination that had defined him throughout his career. His wife Lisa often joked that he worked too hard, but deep down, she admired his unwavering commitment to making the world a better place. Looking back, Dr. Carter realized that while the arrest had been devastating, it had also given him a platform to fight for something bigger than himself. It reminded him that even in the darkest moments, there is always room for light, if you're willing to shine it. And shine he did, becoming not just a healer of bodies but a beacon of hope for those seeking justice and equality. In the end, Dr. Elijah Carter's story wasn't just about survival. It was about triumph. Triumph over adversity, triumph over fear, and triumph over injustice. He proved that no matter how difficult the road, resilience and compassion could pave the way to a brighter future. For Dr. Carter, the true miracle wasn't saving lives in the operating room. It was inspiring others to believe they could change the world.